Today, we're diving into one of Indian history's most debated figures, Tipu Sultan, the famous tiger of Mysore. His story is, well, it's a total battlefield of conflicting narratives, and our job is to try and make sense of it all.
And this really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? The one that gets argued about to this day. Was he this heroic freedom fighter, a visionary standing up to the British, or was he a brutal tyrant who ruled through fear? The truth, as you're about to see, is way more complicated than just picking a side.
So on one side of the coin, you have this view, which comes straight from the official records of his own court, and no surprise, they paint a picture of a brilliant, forward-thinking leader, a modernizer who was building a state that could actually go toe-to-toe with the Europeans.
But then you flip that coin over, and you get this, a completely different story. This version comes from local histories, from the people in the regions he conquered, and it talks about a ruler who was anything but a hero. It describes forced conversions, mass deportations, just widespread suffering. So, what gives? How can both of these be true?
Okay, let's get into it. To even begin to understand the man, you have to understand the world he lived in. And let me tell you, Tipu Sultan was not ruling in a time of peace. His world was one of constant, brutal, non-stop conflict.
I mean, just look at this timeline. His entire reign, from the moment he took the throne in 1782 to his death in battle in 1799, was just war. He was literally surrounded by enemies, the Marathas, the Nizam of Hyderabad, and the biggest threat of all, the British East India Company. His kingdom was in a fight for its very survival, and that fact shaped every single thing he did.
And to survive those wars, Tipu knew his kingdom had to modernize, and fast. This is where that innovator story comes from. He brought in a new calendar and new coins to tighten his control. He created a modern tax system to pay for his army. And, get this, he developed some of the most advanced rocket artillery in the world at the time. They were so good, the British actually copied his designs after they defeated him. He was basically turning his entire kingdom into a war machine. So that's one part of the story, Tipu the innovator, fighting off outside enemies. But, and this is a huge but, the story gets a whole lot darker when you start looking at how people inside his growing kingdom experienced his rule. You see, Mysore wasn't some unified, happy kingdom. It was an empire that Tipu was building by force. And for the people in places like Malabar, Coorg, and Mangalore, he wasn't their defender, he was their conqueror. And they fought back against his rule, hard. It's from their stories that we get a very different picture of the tiger of Mysore. And this is where it all comes to a head. On the left, you have the official version from his court records. He's a strong leader, a unifier, a defiant opponent of the Europeans. But on the right, you have the local records, and they tell of entire populations being forcibly moved, of temples and churches being destroyed because they were centers of rebellion, and of people being forced to convert to ensure their loyalty. Two completely different realities. This, right here, is the huge challenge for any historian. You've got his number one enemy, the British, who were more than happy to spread every negative story they could to make him look like a monster and justify their own invasion. So you have to somehow pick through all of that propaganda and figure out what's a legitimate local account of suffering and what's just spin. It's a tough job. And you know, this kind of careful, nuanced analysis is exactly what we're all about here. So if you appreciate this approach to history, one that really tries to weigh all the evidence to find the truth, then I want to ask you something. If you want more videos like this on true, genuine Indian history, then subscribe to this channel. So with all these contradictions, how do we ever find the truth? How do we get an answer? Well, modern historians don't just guess or pick the story they like better. They actually have a method. And the secret is this. You don't fully trust any single source. Instead, you look for the moments where different independent sources, even enemies, all happen to describe the same event. It's called the method of convergence. And it's how you cut through all the noise. So here's how it works. You take the British accounts, knowing they're hostile. Then you take Tipu's own letters, knowing he's trying to look good. Then you take the local records, like from a temple or a missionary. And then, here's the key, you lay them all out and you look for the overlap. When a British general, Tipu himself, and a local village account all describe the same thing, say a forced deportation, well then you know it very likely happened. And when historians do this, the simple hero or villain label just completely falls apart. The evidence forces you to a much more complex and, I think, much more interesting conclusion. Tipu Sultan was a ruler of dualities, a man shaped by the brutal wars he had to fight, his own strong beliefs, and, yeah, probably a deep-seated fear of rebellion from within. Okay, so this brings us to the final, most important takeaway from all of this.
To really understand a figure like Tipu Sultan, you have to be able to hold two big, contradictory ideas in your head at the exact same time. On the one hand, he was absolutely a determined anti-colonialist. His fight against the British was real, it was important, and he was an incredibly effective opponent. That is a fact. But on the other hand, he was a harsh, authoritarian ruler. The suffering he inflicted on people in Coorg and Malabar who fought against him was also real. That is also a fact. He was both things at once. And maybe that's the real lesson here. History isn't a sports match where you have to pick a team. It's not about finding a perfect hero or a cartoon villain. It's about having the maturity to look at real, complicated human beings and accept them for everything they were, the good and the bad. In the end, Tipu's story leaves us with this really tough, timeless question, one that we're still grappling with today. Can a noble cause, like resisting a foreign invasion, ever justify brutally repressing your own people? There's no easy answer to that, and that's exactly what makes his legacy so powerful.
Now, for anyone who wants to go deeper down this rabbit hole, we've listed the key sources that we used for this explainer right here. I really encourage you to check them out. Thanks so much for watching.